Welcome to the Evidence Files. Today my guest is Deepak Chapagain from Volunteer Corps Nepal. He's the co-founder and president. Welcome to the show. And just tell us a little bit about Volunteer Corps Nepal and what you guys do.
First of all, I'd like to thank you, Rob, for this wonderful opportunity to introduce myself and the organization I'm leading, Volunteer Corps Nepal. We are the humanitarian and development organization, so founded in 2018, and we specialize in disaster response, including rescue, relief, and more rehabilitation works. We have around 8,000 local community volunteers from different part of Nepal. And our strength is our volunteers. So when disaster strikes in Nepal, we deploy our volunteers from rescue to relief and to do rehabilitation projects for some longer term to bring the community back to normal life. So that's what we are as of now.
So your one of your recent projects was Jadrako, right? There was an earthquake.
Exactly.
I don't know the magnitude. How?
So it's 6.7.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so just tell us a little bit about that as an example.
The first earthquake was occurred on 3rd November 2023. So in the night. So the earthquake that with the magnitude of 6.7, it hit Jadrako district, and almost around 156 people died. Not just Jadrako but even the West Rokum. So immediately, the people called me from that belt, and the next day we deploy our 5 rescue team from Kathmandu. So who are very professional rescue workers, and they have done a lot of good jobs around the country. So we deploy them, and we rescued 18 people from the rubble. I know it sounds very hard to say, it's very painful story, but the good part is we have the team who can go on ground during the disaster, and they can just pull the bodies from those rubbles. So it's very hard to say, we pull the dead body even, but the good part is the team is there who are on ground when disaster strikes. So we continued that response till 5th day, even after the third of the first earthquake. On 6th of November there was another earthquake that damaged most of the vulnerable household who were already cracked from the first one. So our team were already on the ground, so they even supported very quickly. Within some days we were able to build around 20 temporary shelters. We supported with around 25 wash facilities. So that's what we did very quickly during this West Rokum earthquake and this Jadrako. And after that we supported with the relief material. As of now, even just a few days ago, I was there to respond with 950 families, supported by this SWARS action from the Hong Kong government as well. So we were supporting the families for this relief activities till this, time. It just passed around 4-5 months. But if you see the ground reality, people are still in need with the relief. But now they are looking for shelter. So we are trying to work with some shelter activities as well, and we are trying to support with the school reconstruction projects as well. We want to set up some temporary learning centers with 4 or 5 schools. So that's what it's ongoing right now as of this particular earthquake that happened a few months earlier. But also what we are trying to do is we want to train local community volunteers out there. We don't have volunteers there in that area. So we are trying to train 100 volunteers from each district, from Jadrako 100 and West Rokum next 100, and we want to bring those volunteer groups from each of the municipalities who are highly affected, because tomorrow. We never know. It may be the bigger one, next in few years. So we have to be prepared for that. So that's what we are thinking in response to this particular earthquake.
So let me break down a couple parts of that. So the first thing is, how do you go about getting, say, like specialized rescuers? Because that's got to be a small volume of people to find volunteers from, right?
First, what we have already in our team is we have the experts of this rescue team in VCN, so they are already on board. So it's very easy for us to deploy our team on ground. But I know. It's very hard to deploy quickly because of the transportation,
Yeah.
So that's one issue. But the other part is we have selected some of the vulnerable district based on the disaster that occurred, that happened previously. So based on that, we have already the roster of volunteers, so where we can call them very quickly, so that's how we develop the volunteers. But besides that, what we do is when we call the volunteers, our volunteers are on our board or on our roster based on different criteria. For example, we don't bias the age groups. It could be like normally it could be they could be 50 years even, because volunteerism is something that you want to give free of cost to the community, to the society that they are in. So we bring the volunteers group from that group of people where they want to contribute towards their own community, towards their local community, towards their own society. So they come with the mission of serving voluntarily. So it's even not paid volunteers. For example, when we call volunteers, like tomorrow when we want to train the volunteers in Jajarkot, we reach with all the municipalities or rural municipalities in Jajarkot, and we will work very closely with the local government as well, and we will ask them to bring the number of people who want to serve their own community. So that's how we choose the volunteers, and we train them. And normally when we train those volunteers, we give that name list to the municipality, to the local government, to the chief district officer, so that they can use those name when disaster happens, they can call them very quickly when they are in need. And also, like, we give that database to the Ministry of Home, where they can have the roster of volunteers, and whenever the government need the number of volunteers, so they can pick the volunteers and they can deploy on ground in particular district. And also, like, what we have the like our strategy is we want to work within 24 hours when disaster happens, meaning act first is our strategy. So to meet that strategy, we have to be very quick in deploying the volunteers and mobilizing the volunteers. That's how we work on.
So, and then if for, say, a larger incident, the government could pick from those volunteer groups to respond to a much bigger incident, even if it's maybe not in their area, right?
What happened, for example, if you see the history in 2019, there was the tornado in Tarai, in Bara and Persa, which was not seen. I have not heard about tornado in Nepal. So what happened was we have like very limited trained volunteers in that district. So what we did during the time is we called the volunteers from Saptari, which is a bit far, but the volunteers were able to come within few hours, and they supported the in the managing the dead body and everything. So if it's the nearby location, it will be easy to call the volunteers and ask them to support. Okay, there has been a big disaster, so why don't you go and help? So that's how they be energized themselves and they go and support the people. That's one part as well. But technically it's a bit hard. For example, if the big disaster happened in like in Janjarkot, if we take the example, so we were not able to call the volunteers from Tarai. So because logistically it's a bit hard for us. Instead of that, we send the volunteers from Kathmandu, the train one. So that's how it become the feasible for us. And beside that, what we also do is there was another flood and landslide in this Helambu in 2021. So what we did during the part of rehabilitation projects, we built 25 shelters there. So we bought the volunteers from Tarai, from Saptari, from Sarlai, and we deploy them to build the infrastructure. So that's how we try to bring the volunteers from one part to support in another part. So that's how we enroll the volunteers.
Well, and it's probably useful for the people that are watching or listening to this that are not familiar with Nepal, is that some of these places you're talking about are not easy to get to under normal circumstances, right? The roads are maybe not good because they're way up in the mountains, or and then especially when you have landslides or floods, sometimes that will close off the roads. So those are the kinds of problems that you're talking about logistics wise, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because Nepal is divided in three parts. We call it like the higher Himalaya, the hilly region, and the Tarai region. So it's good, like geographically Nepal is blessed with a lot of these things. So you don't see this kind of geography in abroad, or let's say in Europe or in US, other part of the world. So we are very blessed with this geographical, that's where in 1 hour, if you fly from one to another, you can have the freezing point as well in the higher Himalaya, and you will have the temperature of 40 degree in the same country in the difference of 1 hour. So we are gifted by that part geographically. But I truly agree that it's very hard to response in those kind of area. Because it's very hard to deploy from one area to another because of this logistical hindrance.
And I want to add to that point again for the less familiar people. So you keep mentioning the Tarai, which is basically like a plains area on the border of India, right? True. So that area it's very hot. But it's also very low. So the issues there, for example, can be flooding, can be wildfires, droughts. And then you go from close to sea level up to where you're talking about the Himalayan highland areas.
Exactly.
Where now you're talking, like Namche Bazaar is what, like 4,000 meters? Something like that?
Yeah.
So 14,000 feet for the U.S. Non-metric folks. But yeah, so I mean, and you're talking like a physical distance of maybe like 200 miles at most.
Exactly.
In those differences. So from a logistical standpoint, that's why it can be quite challenging, because you can be going from two literal different climates almost.
Exactly.
So speaking of that, obviously I'm also heavy into the disaster side.
Just want to hear. I just remember one incident recently. Like we were deploying some of the volunteers in Janjarkot, but the problem was because of some high altitude, we had some issues with some of the team. So it's very hard that we can't bring the people from Tarai to respond in the Himalaya region, because the temperature that they can cope in Tarai is a bit different. It's very hard to cope in the Himalaya areas as well. So it's not just logistically, but even from the health issue. Like it's very hard for us to bringing one volunteer from one part to another. So
well, I mean, anything from I'm gonna use feet for a second, my aviation side, but anything from about 9,000 feet up, the atmospheric conditions are so much different, oxygen concentration and pressure and things, that people that normally live at sea level, especially in the Tarai where it's much hotter as well, to come up to that kind of elevation with the colder air, it can be very difficult for people to handle. So so the segue I was making from that is also because of that varied landscape, Nepal has its pretty wide share of disaster type stuff that it deals with, right? So like I know that the largest issues in terms of either human casualty or economic damage are floods, landslides, wildfires, and lightning. Now, earthquakes do happen here as well. In terms of the volume of damage, when they happen, they tend to be really extreme, but I don't think that they cause damage all that often. Is that right?
Yeah, true.
So, but flooding, landslides, and to probably close extent wildfires every year is an issue, right? So, so tell me a little bit about that. So, like for example, I think most people can sort of just imagine a flood. You know, the river gets higher and eventually it spills into things. But in the topography that you're dealing with, floods and landslides almost always seem to come together,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah, true.
So, and like for example, like in the Gorkha earthquake in 2015, which was Nepal's really big one over the last 50 or 100 years, landslides from that were also a problem. So I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about how like early warning is, you know, obviously it's really hard to predict when a specific landslide is going to occur, but what kinds of things are people trying to do to sort of reduce the risk or at least give some advisory, that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's. I'm happy that you picked this topic because this is what we really need at the moment because we never faced a big earthquake like for in if we talk particularly about people like me, the old generation like my grandfather, they faced the bigger earthquake in I think it's like 1980s, so they already faced that earthquake. So after that 2015 was one of the biggest earthquake. Many people died, over 9,000 people lost their life, which is a big tragic for every one of us. And seeing that tragedy, after that we face even a lot of disaster. It's not earthquake just, but flood. We never faced that. It was one of the big in 2007. In Kosi, in one of the belt in Tarai. So that was one of the flood that we faced, and even after 2015 we faced disaster like flood, lake burst, glacier melting. It's not just in Tarai, it's even the high Himalaya. So but the thing is, we are not prepared for that. Every time we are facing, we just I feel very sad to say, because I'm in this line, I'm here to save the people's life. So but I'm not really aware, even myself. The reason it's not that I'm not aware. We want to, because one organization can do anything.
Right.
We need people to come up together. So this is what we are trying to do, advocate with different agencies who are working with this early warning system. Like people are talking about anticipatory action these days. A lot of seminars are ongoing. But the thing is, how much are we conscious about this on the ground? That's my question for everyone. It's not just that. But I truly agree. If you ask me, people like you are the responsible to take it in one limit. If you say that, I truly agree on that part. But what I want to say from your podcast right now is, even if you see a big, just a few months ago, there was the visit from UN Secretary here in Nepal. He went to Mount Everest. So when he came back to his country, so he never post regarding the incident, regarding the glacier melting, regarding the Everest is melting. He never pointed that issue back. So what we feel is the world has to listen from us. maybe we are this small organization, but we are the one who are working on the ground. So we know the reality of the ground, and we know the impact that has been created because of this global warming and all these things. So if we talk about the preparatory part, or let's say early warning system, so like it's progressing. I'm not saying nothing has happened. Like some of the institutions are trying to set up, for example, if we talk about some organization like ICMOD, they are trying to work on this. Even I know one of my team from Practical Action, he's working about this early warning system. But there are very few organizations who are just working in this preparedness part. And we feel very like sad telling to the large audience that people are not investing in the preparedness part. This early warning system is itself a big preparedness. So when disaster happens and people dies, we can, like, only the world will listen to the numbers. If there is the death, people will listen that part. If there will be no any death, like, they won't listen. So we need to make them feel like even there is a damage of, for example, I want to take you a bit like few months back, there was another earthquake in Bajang, which is in the far west of Nepal. So just few people died there, and there was no any news as compared to this Janjarkot. The earthquake is of similar Richter, but what happened is a lot of houses were cracked, lot of old buildings were damaged, but nobody has got that news so far. People, that district couldn't catch the large audience, but in this particularly Janjarkot, this big number of people died, and everybody, the world is coming here and supporting. But even now, it's been like 4 or 5 months, people have already forgotten. They have not put their thought for what could be the next option now. How should we prepare the people?
Right.
They are not investing anymore in the preparedness part.
Right.
Like there is no any early warning system. If we go and talk with the government, local government there, even the provincial government, they are not aware. So we have to invest a lot more in this early warning system. For example, there was multiple disaster. Even if we look about the higher belt, just few months ago there was a big disaster in Mustang. It's in the higher Himalaya part. The lake burst and the big disaster happened. The whole valley was covered with the soil and the glaciers, and the mud. But after I went, like few months later, people are coping that disaster by themselves. When I talked with the local government, they are already in the normal phase, like, oh no, this is the disaster that happened, but no, it may not happen never now. So that's the thought, what people are carrying on. So my concern is we need to put some we need to do some advocacy this. It sounds different, but like, for example, if people are not educated, so it's not that we need to go and give them copy and okay, you just read it. It's not that. We need to make them aware that, look, if you don't educate, this happens.
Right.
So that we can just give them copy books and some tutorial things. That's what has to be done. But nowadays what it's happening is some of the organizations, they have installed some early warning system. For example, in Tarai there are some instrument which has been installed in different rivers, but there is the instrument which has been installed by a different institution, but the local government, the local people are not aware what that really does. So we need to aware them, people. We need to aware them how that works. So and what preparedness that we need to do when, for example, if tomorrow rain is falling, so we can make aware to farmers that, look, don't cut rice. So when it rains tomorrow, your rice is going to be, disturbed everywhere. So that's kind of things we need to teach for this people. I know we are coping all this kind of multiple disaster, but thinking from the people's perspective, the common people, we need to aware them. We need to aware regarding this early warning system, this anticipatory tools that has been developed, or if not, we need to develop it. So that it's a big thing. So if we start from the scratch, I think like we can save a lot of lives of the people. Yeah.
Well, I can tell you from my experience in the field that I think there's a couple part problem. So one is, so many of the things you're talking about, like the various devices, that measure the river levels, things like that. Those are often done in sort of smaller projects, right? So there's a lot of good organizations that are doing that, but they can only do it in, say, one river or one district or something like that, right? And partly because of the logistical challenges you talked about. Some of it is maybe manpower, some of it's maybe funding, some of it's maybe just the trying to figure out how to do it. There's all kinds of things. But the problem is with that is what happens is you have all this data collection in various places, but nobody, there's no centralized place, right? So that's one issue. The second issue is that because of the nature of the various disasters. So you mentioned one that I'm very sure that most of the people watching this have never heard of. So glacial lake outbursts, right? So I've written on this extensively. Go to my website; it'll be linked down below. About the glacier ice, which is slowly shrinking over year upon year, right? Because the average annual temperature in the Himalayas is rising faster than most places in the world. Well, it creates multiple problems. So one is an inconsistent sort of flood to dry season, right? Because when you have a continuous melt that's not happening like normal, then non-normal things happen. But then the second thing is there's this creation of this thing called the glacial lakes, right? So what people have to understand is when you get very high up, you have these glaciers that have been there for millennia. And as they melt, just like when snow melts in your yard at home, you get pools of water that collect and they become these lakes. But because we're talking about glaciers of billions of tons of ice, these lakes get pretty big, but they're only held in by snow that's essentially still melting, right? So, and when they burst, like you said, I forgot what the name of the place was,
Mustang.
Oh yeah. When they burst, it's pretty much like how it looks a lot like what a tsunami looks like.
Exactly.
Because it just takes everything. It's an avalanche made of mud, water, everything. So they're pretty catastrophic. But you need people to go up to pretty high up in pretty rough terrain to install things that can monitor the condition of those glaciers and the lakes, and then transmit that data to somebody so that it can be monitored. So that's an example of the extreme side of the logistic problem. And then once you have all that, then there's still that issue of how do we take it from the scientists, the data collection, and get it to the people in a way that it's useful to the people, right? That's the other big issue. So to your point, I think it really has to be a multi-organizational approach, but also thinking bigger than our own projects, right? So like in any field everywhere, everybody has their own project that they hang on to, But the thing is that in order for that outcome to be useful, all that data really needs to be shared. And I think that, I've attended a few events recently, as you know. I think there's a very strong feeling toward that, but I don't think the organizations have quite figured out the mechanics of it yet. How do we do this in a more efficient way? Because the situation is going to get worse before it gets better, So I was looking at before we came here, I was looking at just the various disaster numbers and things, right? And so when you look at Nepal's trajectory over the last 20 or so years, when the the numbers are the most accurate.
Exactly.
20 years ago, first of all, you had a much higher population in the rural areas
Exactly.
because that's a whole nother topic for a different show, but a lot of people have migrated to
Exactly.
Kathmandu. So you had an actually bigger population in the rural areas.
Yeah.
But you had fewer reported disasters of the magnitudes that you have now. So the disasters that are happening now are happening more frequent and usually more dramatically. But then the second thing is, because of the scope of those disasters, they are reaching the populated areas, which is then raising the costs. Because if you have a flood that rips through a village of 100 people, the economic cost is not measurable compared to, say, when it goes through a major city, right? So it's that comparison. I'm not making a judgment on the value, but
True.
just the way it's calculated. So now, like the Kosi River flood, which I think was 2019.
Yeah. It's on like 2020. It's 22.
One of those, but that affected
Exactly.
like several 100,000 households because it was not only here in Nepal, it was also India as well, right?
True.
So when those big events are happening, they're also still affecting way more people, even though the population has sort of shifted, because those disasters are just coming further down the path, So I think that makes it even more important to really focus on, centralized sharing, because to your point, so the earthquake that was out in the far west, I heard about that because I follow an earthquake social media that's produced by the U.S. Geological Survey that tells you every earthquake that happens in the world. They don't tell you anything about, like, other than just where it was and how big it was.
Okay.
But the point is, because I'm nerdy and follow that kind of stuff, that was how I heard about it. So you're right. I don't think I saw it in the news until like 2 days later, and it was like a really brief thing, probably because, like you said, there was only something like a dozen or so deaths or whatever it was. And that's another issue, is that we always like to measure these things in dollars and lives, right? But that's not the best way when you're strategizing for how to plan ahead for those things, So like one thing that happens with landslides a lot is it will cut off transportation between communities. And in some cases, some communities can be stuck in a narrow area for some time. But the news doesn't care because it's not a cool, reportable story, especially if they can't get there to get the nice pictures, to get the clicks, So we can't really think too much that way, because I think that it will always be reported in a way that's not helpful toward making an effective system for early warning and for, minimizing the damage both to lives and to property, right? But anyway, that's all very dark, so I want to switch to something that's kind of interesting.
Okay.
So one area, and I don't know that you guys do it as much, but I know you've considered it, is also because a lot of the areas we're talking about are rural areas. How do people manage livestock in these types of disasters?
If we talk about, you are talking about livestock.
You like cattle, goats, cows, things like that.
No, like even like particularly in this west earthquake, like recently, I was having some of the talk with the team from Stitching Nepal. So and then like from that team, they came up with a guy, who wants to support with this cattles, because when we feel, when we talk about rights, everyone has the right to live. It's the human being as well as the animal. Everyone are equal when it talks about living. So there are, few organizations who are working particularly with this animal rights. When a disaster happens, they go and care with the animals as well. And even we do that part. But we have not specialized that much. And that has to be because of limited resources.
Sure.
Because everyone, when disaster happens, the first priority comes saving people.
Of course.
That's the normal thought. It comes to our mind. So but we agree that everyone has to be alive when there is a big disaster. So it's similar that even the cattle, like if we talk about buffalo, goat, just a few days ago there was the fire in the even the western in the same belt, in the same region, and there was a lot of death of animals as well, and it makes me pain to see all those news, but we can't do anything at all. So we want to do, like, we have some of the team who can just go and look to them, but so we have to even for this we have to make aware people that the value of life is equal as ours is equal to the animals that they are surviving. When the buffalo die, when the cow die, it makes the equal value that the human being dies. So we have to go in, tell the people, and we have to be prepared as well. For example, when we take the people of rescue of human beings from Kathmandu, we have to take somebody who can do the rescue of animals as well. So we have to think even on that part, but because of all the constraint with the resources, we are not specializing particularly in that part. But whatever we can do, whatever we were doing in past years, we are even trying to save animals as well, bringing them to one safe zone. So that's what we are doing, and our volunteers are doing for that. But I truly agree that we are not giving equal, footage to save them as compared to the human being. So I agree on that part, but it has to be like the same. The footage that we need to save for human beings is equal to the saving even one chicken or goat, whatever.
Well, and I think one way to relay that importance to others who maybe don't feel the same strongly about it is in many of these places, the animals and the humans depend upon each other for survival. So it's not even like even if you're talking from a strictly practical standpoint, it would for the humans who may not think it's a priority is really sort of wrong, because it sort of is a priority, because maybe not right at that moment, but immediately afterwards, even the humans will suffer for the loss of the animals as well, right?
Exactly.
The other thing I would add, and I'm just going to throw this little token piece of trivia in there because I read too much, I think. So, it's a myth that animals tend to respond in a way to survive earthquakes and other natural disasters. So there's been a number of different studies. Now, they can tend to detect them coming sooner than humans can, because they can hear and feel. But one person likened it to human beings once they detect an earthquake. Just like humans, animals have that moment of okay, what is happening? They know something's off, something's happening. But they do the same thing that people do, is they just follow their instinct to flee to whatever they think is safe, but it's not a rational decision. So the point of me saying that is, I think some people tend to think, oh, they'll be fine, they know how to survive on their own, but the reality is they really don't. They just react like we do. They just have the physical nature to sort of be able to run further or run faster, but for the most part they are doing the same thing we're doing, so they still need that care. And one thing that I thought was interesting, so I teach at Softwareica, and they sponsor the show, by the way, thank you, Softwareica. But there was a group of students there at the TechX event that they had back in the summer, last summer, and the students actually had designed this project for tracking farm animals for after disasters, how to sort of find them if they scatter and run, and actually published it in an academic journal. And what their main principle is something like chipping, which is done in the U.S. for especially for pets, and also like free range cattle, something like chipping. But they devised a much cheaper way to do it, where then you could just sort of activate it after the fact to find where they all are, and go collect them, either because they just ran off or maybe because they're trapped somewhere. So I think that there's there are some solutions as well that could be low cost but effective, that could potentially be implemented at some point as well. So, because I think it's really important obviously for the animals themselves, but also after the fact. Like I said, the humans tend to rely on them as well, but also it's the idea that days, weeks, or even months afterwards that these domesticated animals that really don't know how to survive on their own are stuck off wandering, especially in a place like the hills and the higher areas. So, I've seen. So when I was here for the Gorka quake, we were up pretty high up in the mountains, and it was really interesting what some of the locals in some of the affected areas up there had done to sort of collect and take care of the farm animals that they had. And I just remember being on this one road, and it was a dusty road. I don't even know where we were because we had been traveling all day. But it was quite high up, and this village area, most of the structures had collapsed or had broken apart to some degree. And so this one guy, so all the people had left that village and went further up because the next village was less affected. But this one guy had come, and he had just taken like all the rubble and like sort of moved things around in such a way that they had 2 like very large buffalo or cows or something, whatever they were, I don't know, because it was hard to see, and like 10 goats and like 10 chickens, and then he had 2 dogs that were like sitting there as like the guardian, because all these creatures that normally don't share like a pen were all just like there. So obviously people there care about it too, but like you said, like the tendency is to think about ourselves and our families and stuff first.
But the other part is disaster happened, so animal died, but when you work with the rehabilitation projects as well, as we do the rehabilitation part as well, so if you go for the assessment after the for some short-term or long-term projects, the complaint, it's not complaint, but the issues that arise from the communities. They lost their goat, they lost their buffalo, they lost their animal, they lost their chicken. So that's the major issue that people face, after the disaster. So the good part is, like, I'm happy that you asked me this, which is a really very, very good point to think, because when people wants to be in normal condition, they want to bring all those animals, back. Like if they would have like 2 buffalo and they died, and they want to have next to buffalo more, like in the normal phase. So we, from our perspective, I'm not telling like I'm right, but I know I'm wrong. The thing that I'm telling is saving the life is always the practical things, of people, but if we think a bit far, if we think about like far-sighted and think about those people who lost their cattle, and go and talk to those, after some months, and they will tell that I have this much, like a number of cattle, and I used to earn money from this cattle, and I have no source of income, So even for that reason, if we try to work from the beginning, like how to save the cattle in the disaster, so if we can bring those component in the preparedness part, that will be very low cost in the recovery. So I think you got what I mean to say. Like
Yeah.
in the preparedness part, if we add that component as well, the money that we need to put later on the like rehabilitation phase will be much more less, because they can save their life, they can save the the source of economic, so how they are being, earning money from their cattle or some sort of things. So if we can like that, this just suddenly came to my mind, in this conversation. Maybe now whenever we train our local volunteers on ground, maybe this is the one component that we need to put very, closely. Like whenever we're going to work with the community people, first it's life saving, but like side by side we need to make them prepared how they can save the life of their, cattle as well. For example, how they can save their, life of the goat. Maybe we can talk about the structure that they will build to put their goat in the house, so maybe we can talk all those things. So we don't need to put money back on the rehabilitation part that much, so if they can save their source of income during the disaster. So I think this is one of the good lessons that I'm taking from you from this, podcast today.
Well, and the double benefit is you're saving the lives of the animals up front as well.
True.
And I know that at least when it comes to like, wildfires, there is some guidance on that, but I think it's been less discussed or studied in terms of like floods and landslides, and especially in like the hillier areas where, it's a little bit more difficult to move things around quickly, so yeah, to your point, like it might be the how you build the structure in the first place, maybe where you choose to build it, knowing that this area might, has a good chance to flood. It might not make sense to corral the cattle that close, where they would be first affected, something like that. So
true.
So well, this is all really interesting. It's a weird field because it's exciting, but it also comes with so much tragedy.
Exactly.
And, but it's really important that people do it. I think that Nepal is in a position where it's going to see some really cool advancements, but coupled with greater and more frequent problems to deal with. So those things will somewhat go together. But it has to be done because it's not going to change for some time.
True.
So in closing, if somebody's watching this now that wants to be a volunteer, wants to be a donor, wants to contribute in some way they haven't thought of yet, what kinds of things would you tell them?
Whenever I go and ask fund, not just monetary, not just financial contribution, we have the people from a various background as well. We have even senior citizens who volunteer with us. They volunteer by sharing their knowledge. So we have youth by sharing their energy with us. So it's not just always the fund to support the people, but also the energy that we need. Our volunteers need every time when we go to respond any disaster, because I feel very sad always talking about this disaster, but I have to do.
Right.
If I don't, who is going to do?
Right.
So it makes me pain, I don't want to ask fund to save life of the people, but I have to save life. What I always feel is, if I ask something for the people, and if somebody will be alive from that support, that's the big thing that you can achieve in your lifetime.
Right.
So it's not just always the financial support, but also the in-kind contribution that you can make for us, and you can volunteer with us. Doesn't matter with the age groups, whatever age you are. If you are willing to work with us, if you are willing to volunteer with us, we are very happily want to welcome you on our team. So it's all about sharing knowledge. It's all about contributing to the community people. It's all about saving lives, which is the most that matters for every human being. And I want to add, it's not just of human being but as well as the animals as well.
Yeah.
So that's how we want to contribute to our people, to our country, to our community, and the larger audience. Like Nepal is always vulnerable to disaster. We have faced a lot of disaster in last few years. So we have to be prepared for this. If we want get prepared, so tomorrow maybe the big is going to happen. So a lot of things needs to be done right now. So I'll ask everyone of the people, the team, from everywhere who are listening to this podcast, like from your this conversation, like just support for the cause. It's not a project. Saving life is not a project. It's a mission. We have a mission that tomorrow if disaster happens, we feel happy that no human casualty, no cattle die. That's our mission.
Yeah.
So we just want to move with that mission and putting up things together for a common goal to save lives of people and the animals. That's all what I want to say from your this podcast.
So I will say Volunteer Corps Nepal will be linked in the description. My organization, EALS Global Foundation, if you're from the US side and you're looking to see what maybe you can do for Nepal, but you're kind of far away. So EALS Global Foundation and Volunteer Corps Nepal will both be linked in the bottom. But I would add one more thing to that is you said it broadly, sharing knowledge. But don't forget, if you're one of the young people who's not ready to jump into a flood zone or drive up into the mountains, there's always a need for programmers, database managers, marketing and design people who are good with social media. Like there's a lot of things that people can do that they don't even necessarily need to leave their house maybe, right?
True.
They don't need money necessarily to do it. So there's a lot of different ways. Even people, who are specialists in animal behavior, that could offer some insight. So if people want to do something, it's not a matter of limitation, it's a matter of creativity.
Exactly.
Right? For people like Deepak and I that have gone into those places, I can totally understand if you don't want to do that, but there's definitely other ways you can contribute. So thank you so much. This is a really interesting conversation. Your organization does really great work. I will also make sure to add social media, so Facebook, and do you have other social media? Instagram, right?
Yeah.
So
Instagram, and we have LinkedIn as well.
Okay, so those will all be linked. Make sure you check them out. And then you can always contact them directly. You can contact me through my site if you want to ask more questions. And, maybe we'll get some people that are interested in giving some time, energy, or information.
Thank you, Rob, for this wonderful opportunity, and thank you to all this audience who are listening, watching this show. And we just need, the world is a family, so we need to come up together to save each other. And yes, the geography don't have the boundary. We just are from one to another part. That's all. We are tied up with the same feeling, same third, and that's the human being. And we have to come up for a common purpose to support each other wherever we are living. That's all.
Well, it's very well said, and it's a great way to end. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.